The ancient Greeks were known for their powerful armies and military prowess. They have set examples of their great victories against some of the most powerful empires in history. The Greeks, who were most feared for close combat and physical strength. Have you ever wondered what these super beings fed on? Welcome to Moments in History. And in this video, we will be looking into food and food habits of ancient Greece. Availability of resources. When it came to availability of food resources, ancient Greeks were weaker than none, and it highly influenced the food habits of the ancient Greeks. Being a maritime civilization, they had access to a wide variety of seafood, such as fish, squid, and shellfish. The fertile land allowed them to grow a variety of fruits and vegetables, including olives, grapes, figs, and barley. They also reared animals like sheep, goats, and pigs for meat and dairy products. However, the availability of resources varied across different regions of Greece. For instance, the mountainous areas had limited agricultural land and relied on hunting, while the coastal regions had abundant seafood. The ancient Greeks made the most of their available resources, incorporating them into their cuisine and creating dishes that are still enjoyed today. Well, it's no surprise that unlimited food was available, and only minimum number of people would starve in ancient Greece, as all the states in the past were mostly agricultural based, and the population was significantly low. So food resources was no problem back then, but there were some limitations. The poor and rich. In ancient Greece, food was not only a necessity for survival, but also a symbol of wealth and social status. The rich and powerful could afford to feast on lavish meals, including meat and exotic delicacies, while the poor struggled to make ends meet and often had to settle for simple and humble fare. Meat was a luxury that only the wealthy could afford, as it was expensive and often reserved for special occasions. The poor, on the other hand, had to rely on cheaper and more accessible sources of protein, such as beans and lentils. To make matters worse, there were also limitations on what the poor were allowed to eat. For example, certain types of fish were reserved for the rich, while the poor had to settle for less desirable varieties. Even the use of olive oil, a staple in Greek cuisine, was limited for the poor due to its high cost. These limitations on food choices and resources meant that the poor had to be creative with their cooking and find ways to make the most of what little they had. They often relied on simple and basic ingredients, such as bread, cheese, and vegetables, to make hearty and nutritious meals. In contrast, the rich could indulge in a variety of foods and flavors, and could afford to experiment with exotic spices and ingredients. Meat was a staple in their diet, and was often cooked in elaborate and extravagant ways, such as roasted on a spit or stuffed with herbs and spices. Despite these stark differences, food played an important role in ancient Greek society, both as a means of sustenance and as a symbol of wealth and power. The limitations on food habits of the poor highlighted the stark disparities in Greek society and the challenges faced by those at the bottom of the social ladder. Creativity for food. Imagine being a poor but talented citizen in ancient Greece. Despite having limited resources, the Greeks were known for their creativity in experimenting with food and flavors. They used simple ingredients like bread, cheese, olives, and honey to create a variety of dishes. The Greeks had a deep appreciation for food, and they believed that it played a vital role in their social and cultural lives. The food was not only a source of sustenance, but also a means of expressing oneself. Wealthy Greeks had access to a wider variety of foods, including meat, fish, and exotic fruits imported from other parts of the world. However, the poor had to make do with simple meals consisting of bread, vegetables, and legumes. Despite this, they were able to create flavorful dishes using herbs and spices. One of the most famous dishes from ancient Greece is moussaka, a layered dish made with eggplant, meat, and bechamel sauce. Another popular dish was pasteli, a simple snack made with sesame seeds and honey. Greeks also enjoyed a variety of soups and stews, including lentil soup and fasolada, a white bean soup. In addition to their creativity in cooking, the Greeks also had a deep appreciation for the presentation of food. They believed food should not only taste good, but also look good. They would decorate their dishes with herbs, spices, and edible flowers to create a visually appealing meal. The food habits of ancient Greeks were influenced by their social and economic status, as well as their creativity and appreciation for the finer things in life. Food served in military. As we've come this far in the video, it's clear that the ancient Greeks were a powerful and impressive civilization, and their military was no exception. But with great power comes great responsibility and hunger. You might be wondering if these military beasts were fed any special or luxurious foods that helped fuel their strength and stamina on the battlefield. Well, the answer is a bit of a mixed bag. During the Archaic period, the ancient Greek military consisted mainly of citizen soldiers who brought their own provisions. While this may sound like a fancy way of saying they packed a lunch, their meals were actually quite simple. Soldiers would typically carry basic foods such as bread, cheese, olives, and dried fruit. Not exactly the kind of spread fit for a king, but enough to keep them going during long marches and battles. However, as the Greek military evolved during the classical period, so too did the way they fed their soldiers. The Athenian military, in particular, made a concerted effort to provide soldiers with rations that included wheat or barley bread, salted fish or meat, and cheese. Wine was also sometimes included in the rations, but don't get too excited. It was watered down to prevent drunkenness. Now, before you go picturing ancient Greek soldiers feasting on lamb skewers and roasted quail, it's important to note that the food provided to soldiers was relatively basic and not particularly varied or luxurious. But compared to many civilians at the time, soldiers did receive better food, as the military made sure to provide them with enough sustenance to maintain their health and fuel their physical activity. So there you have it. While the ancient Greeks may not have been dining on gourmet meals fit for the gods, their military was fueled by simple yet effective rations that kept them going through the toughest of battles. Preserving of food. All foods are not available throughout the year, and this was especially true in ancient Greece. Seasonal foods were a part of life, and so the Greeks had to find ways to preserve their food when it was out of season. One of the most common methods of preservation was drying, which involved removing moisture from fruits, vegetables, and meats. The dried food could then be stored for long periods of time without spoiling. Today, we have many other methods of preserving food, such as canning, freezing, and refrigeration. While these methods are more efficient and effective than ancient drying methods, there is something to be said for the simplicity and ingenuity of the ancient Greek techniques. It's amazing to think that, thousands of years ago, people were able to figure out how to make their food last longer without access to the technology we have today. In any case, whether you're drying figs in the hot sun or freezing your leftovers in a modern fridge, the goal is the same: to make sure that food stays fresh and delicious for as long as possible. And while the methods may have changed over time, the importance of preserving food remains just as vital today as it did in ancient Greece. Greeks' eating habit. Are you surprised to learn that while some cultures eat 4 or more times a day, the ancient Greeks only ate 2 meals a day? Despite this, they were able to carry out the demanding physical work required of them. Greek eating habits were based on the idea that food should be simple, balanced, and enjoyable. The first meal of the day, called akritisma, was a simple breakfast consisting of bread or barley cake, along with wine or cheese. The main meal of the day was called dipsa, or depnan, and it was a more substantial affair that included a variety of dishes such as meat, fish, vegetables, bread, and wine. The Greeks believed in the importance of moderation, and their meals were designed to be filling but not overly heavy. In fact, the ancient Greeks saw eating as more than just a means of sustenance. It was a social activity that brought people together to share stories, ideas, and laughter. Greek meals were often accompanied by lively conversation, music, and even poetry. So, while their eating habits may seem strange to us today, it's clear that the ancient Greeks had a deep appreciation for food and its role in both nourishing the body and bringing people together. Perhaps there's something to be learned from their simple yet satisfying approach to eating. Well, that concludes it. All the foods and food habits in ancient Greece. Basically, the rich people fed on meat and luxury foods, whereas poor people barely got to taste meat except for special occasions. If you found this video to be informative, don't forget to like the video. Also, tell us what you think about the food habits of ancient Greeks in the comments. Subscribe so you won't miss out, and have a good day. Bye.